I've never made birria tacos up until recently because I've always thought that they were sort of a pain in the butt to make. I'm here to tell you today they're not, especially if you follow this recipe that I'm going to show you today. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dishes and Fishes where I show you how to cook and set hooks. Birria tacos are delicious, they're affordable, and they're very easy to make. So the only vegetables that we're going to use in this recipe are tomatoes and a yellow onion. And to cut those vegetables, we're going to be using a knife provided by one of the contributors for today's video, Nakano Knives. Nakano Knives is a Japanese knife making company. They make both entry-level chef's knives for the home cook as well as professional level knives for the chef. These knives come factory sharp, they have different types of steel, they have different types of handles, they're good quality, and they get the job done. You can also shop right on their website by style of knife. If you're interested in purchasing a Japanese-style chef's knife, use my code DISHESANDFISHES at checkout for 30% off of your first purchase. Thank you, Nakano Knives. So for our yellow onion, half of it we're going to fine dice, and half of it we're going to cut into large chunks for our braising liquid. After we do that very little bit of knife work, it's time to get our beef on. And for this recipe, we're going to be using chuck roast. So to sear that beef, we're going to just coat it with a nice heavy layer of salt. And then into a warm Dutch oven, I'm going to squeeze a little bit of avocado oil followed by our beef. Once that beef is in there, just leave it alone. It's really difficult to burn chuck roast. Give it a flip. This is the crust that we're looking for on this beef. This is going to provide nice flavor for our broth as well as the final product. Once I sear off the other side, I'm going to remove that beef from the pan. I'm going to add my half yellow onion, 3 cloves of garlic, and I'm going to add some salt to that just to draw out some of the moisture. Once those things start to get fragrant, I'm going to add about a quarter cup of water just so I can scrape the fond off of the bottom of the pot. And after that, I'm going to add 2 to 3 large tomatoes. If you don't have tomatoes, you can just add some tomato paste and let that get nice and toasty. Now, one of the traditional things about birria tacos normally is that they use dried peppers, and I think they normally use guajillo peppers, which is a pepper that I used in my chicken enchiladas video. I don't really have those laying around all the time. You got to either buy them online or you got to buy them at a Mexican grocery store. So we are going to be using chipotle peppers in adobo, which I know might anger some of the traditionalists watching this video, but I promise they're actually better tasting than guajillo chilies in this recipe. I also have them in my cabinet all the time, and you probably do too. So we're going to just use half of a can of chipotles in adobo for this recipe. I'm going to add it right to my onions, garlic, and tomatoes. And also, if you don't have chipotles in adobo, you can get a good final product by just using chili powder and cumin. It's not quite as good, but it'll work. So after that mixture is getting some color on it, I'm going to add my broth. And I'm going to be using some of my homemade chicken stock. I'll tag the video where I made that here. You can use beef stock, you can use water. It's all good, it'll work, and it'll still be delicious in the end. So once that liquid comes to a boil, I'm going to add my beef back to it, put the lid on, and lower that to a simmer for about 2 to 2.5 hours. While that's braising, I'm going to make a little treat for my son. Today, he's going to get a little bit of a poached apple and avocado puree. He loves his avocado. I'm sure you could puree anything with an avocado and he would think it's delicious. This is just what he's getting today. Shouts out, Logue Master T. Good boy. After 2.5 hours, my beef is done. It's tender. You don't want this beef to be just falling apart everywhere. You want it to still have a little bit of give to it. A fork should go into it easily, but you see it still has some resistance. This is perfectly cooked. So now I'm going to let that cool on my stove at room temperature for about an hour and a half. It's going to reabsorb some of that moisture in the broth, and it needs to be cool enough to handle and cut. And once it is, I will chop it up and put it into a container. Now, one of the other traditional parts of this dish is that the tortilla gets dunked into the broth. And I think birria tacos normally leave this broth as it is. They leave that fat layer on the top of the broth, and when they dunk the tortilla in it, it absorbs a lot of that fat. I've tried that method, and I've tried the method that I'm about to show you, and I think my method is a little bit better. So I'm going to put that broth into a container, I'm going to season it with salt, and I'm going to hit it with a stick blender. Blending this up is going to do a few things. It's going to emulsify the mixture so there's not going to be a fat layer on top, and it's going to activate those chipotles in adobo. So this is where you get a little bit of your heat, and you get a whole lot of smokiness from those peppers. If you use a whole jar of the chipotles, this broth is a little too spicy, so be warned, I would stick with a half of a jar, but this broth is amazing. Something else about this recipe is that it is sort of meal prep worthy. This is some beef that I made in the past. You can put it right in your freezer, and when you want birria tacos, take it out, throw it on the griddle, and you have a weeknight birria taco. You can also freeze the broth. So these things I keep on deck whenever I want birria tacos now. I just take them out of the freezer. And one other thing that I keep in the freezer for this dish is the cheese. Another traditional part of this recipe, I believe, is Oaxaca cheese. Like guajillo peppers, it's not something that is laying around in grocery stores frequently. We're going to be using mozzarella cheese, which is another thing that I keep in my freezer often. It's a nice gooey melty cheese, which is what you want. And that's all the work you need to do for this dish. It's ridiculously easy. So my broth that I'm going to eat tonight, I'll put in a sauce pot so it can get warm. I'll put everything I need on this tray. My meat, my sauce, my tortillas. You can use big or small tortillas. You just want to make sure that they are the right size to dunk into your pot. And my cheese. And that's it, guys. It's only 4 things. So I'll throw a couple utensils on my tray and I will head out to the grill. It's raining today, so I sort of have to stay back with my camera. I'm going to start by just putting my sauce on half of that grill on low, and I'll add my meat to the other half of that grill on high so it can get a nice char on it. I also like to add a ladle or 2 of the sauce to that beef to infuse it with that smoky, nice heat, and I'm just going to let that beef alone. It's going to develop a nice sear on one side, which adds a nice crunch to my tacos. Once I'm at that point, I'm going to submerge my tortillas completely in my emulsified sauce and throw them on the middle of my griddle. If you don't have a griddle, you can do this on a cast iron pan. It's just going to take you a little bit longer. Once those tortillas are on my griddle, I'm going to add a nice scoop of meat to each of them. Add as much meat as you can fit and still be able to fold these things over. And then I'm going to rip up that mozzarella cheese and add a little bit to each taco. After that, I'll simply fold them over, and I like to give them a little press with my spatula so that they start to melt and just become a little bit more compact. And that's it. I'll let them crisp up on one side, probably about 1 to 2 minutes, and then they'll be ready to flip. Once you flip them, this is what you're looking for, this nice seared, crunchy crust. It is one of the best textures of a taco, I think, that I've ever had. And if you guys are doubting me on the crunch, here's a little listen. Nice. That's it. Once the cheese is melted, they're done. Take them off. It takes about 10 minutes to make. We're going to serve these tacos with some more of our nice smoky sauce. Garnish those with the other half of our diced onion. Going to add some very nice crunch to these tacos, as well as some cilantro leaves. I don't even cut them. I just put them right on top. The final essential ingredient is a nice squeeze of lime juice. Trust me on that. Don't skip it. It makes all the difference. And that's it, guys. Serve these at any of your parties. You can have them for dinner. You can have them for an appetizer. Dunk them in your sauce. These are one of the most unique and delicious tasting tacos that you can make right at home. And you can keep everything in the freezer. What makes this any better? If you like this video, be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.